I want to talk about crypto because this is a big mover. Ben McMillan is with us, CIO of IDX Digital Assets. Ben, glad you're with us. Look what's going on here when it comes to Bitcoin. It's up 30% for this month of October. Gensler of the SEC seems to give it a little bit of a breather, and Powell. But Jamie Dimon, who's called it somewhat of a fool's gold, even came out today and said it's worthless, but he thinks it's worthless because more regulation's coming, but people want it. What is your opinion on Bitcoin?
Great to see you, Nicole. So as you know, as quantitative asset managers, we're always looking at the data to help us determine the conviction or the weakness behind a rally. And what was really interesting about this rally was really Bitcoin's resilience in the face of general equity market weakness, the Chinese ban on crypto, which was non-trivial. And there's really a few drivers for that. As you mentioned, recently the comments coming out of DC from both Gensler at the SEC as well as Fed Chair Powell disavowing "quote unquote" a ban on Bitcoin, I think were the market saw as largely bullish. There's a lot of bullish sentiment around the speculation of a Bitcoin ETF gaining approval. But I think importantly too, if we zoom out and take a macro perspective, the market is really expressing, I think, concerns about the idea of inflation being "quote unquote" transitory. You look at food prices, you look at energy prices reaching all-time highs, really hitting consumers in the pocketbook. And I think a lot of the bid we've seen recently for Bitcoin is just on the back of the original value proposition of Bitcoin, which was as a store of value. I think it was Paul Tudor Jones who said in his investor letter back in 2020 that the Fed can't print any more Bitcoin. So I think that's what we're seeing here.
And, obviously he's been a proponent, right, over at Paul Tudor Jones. They've invested in Bitcoin. We've seen a lot of big names getting into Bitcoin. And in fact, we've heard a lot of folks talking about 100,000 level for Bitcoin. I mean, doesn't seem so insane, especially when you see how Bitcoin moves, right, from 60,000 to 30,000. Now it's getting closer to 60,000 once again. Would you say Bitcoin's probably a good long-term play? I mean, there's been, as you mentioned, the ETFs. There are several, more than 5 ETFs that are awaiting some sort of approval. And it's my understanding they really can't hold too much Bitcoin in that. They can hold some Bitcoin products or, I'm not sure how much Bitcoin they really can hold in those ETFs. But are you an investor in Bitcoin long-term, a believer at least?
So we definitely believe in the long-term value proposition of digital assets in general, and that includes Bitcoin. And part of that is just what we've seen the use case become. It went from being very theoretical to now we're seeing it with smart contracts, Ethereum, and DeFi in particular, and then even with Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. So we're past the point, and even in the clients that we talk to, be it financial advisors or institutions, 1 or 2 years ago, the value proposition might have been a little bit more ethereal. It was much more kind of an interesting asset class. Now we're starting to see folks that even 2 years ago didn't believe in Bitcoin starting to understand that it's an asset class. It's here to stay. It looks very much like the internet in the early days, in the early to mid 90s. And advisors or institutions, are starting to think about how to put that in their portfolio. What I will say though, is it's not lost on them that the volatility is also here to stay. This is an asset class that has seen 50% plus drawdowns. And I always have to remind people about the math of drawdowns when you get to 50%. You have to start making multiples of your capital back just to get back to break even. And that's not something to be taken lightly. And so that always is the biggest issue when we talk to fiduciaries or really anybody that's putting client capital at risk. And that's why, ultimately we put forth our risk managed strategy in an index form, actually as a mutual fund. So we chose to file for a risk managed Bitcoin mutual fund as opposed to an ETF, in part because we thought it was a more prudent approach to the liquidity in the space, while delivering something that's hopefully accessible for a broader swath of investor.
Right, and that's more to my point. And so that being said, there's obviously different kinds of crypto products. Marc LoPresti is with us, co-managing director of the strategic funds. You talk about, Marc, some of the other proponents that really will give a boost to this group, the classic case for Bitcoin and others, starting with commodity prices. Tell me more, Marc.
Well, so when you talk about Bitcoin and crypto, you really have to put Bitcoin into a class of its own because it truly is. Bitcoin as a store of value with classic asset scarcity versus everything else, including Ethereum, which is important, but that's part of the DeFi story. And the investment case for both really needs to be separated out. And I think that thesis is supported by, while you see Bitcoin just before going live, testing 55, people are saying we might be seeing an all-time high get tested soon, although we are seeing resistance at around 56,000, which seems to be holding pretty firm. The rest of the altcoin world is not riding Bitcoin's coattails. There are some that are, but not all issuers, by and large, are riding Bitcoin's coattails. What we're looking at right now are some of the classic metrics. We're watching the fear and greed. We're watching where the resistance and the support levels are. We're well watching, as we always do. But we think that this is an indication, especially if we break this 56,000 level, that we could be seeing a multi-month long-term bull run in Bitcoin that takes us through into 2022.
And Mark, quickly, does it go right through the highs, the whatever 64,000 and on and above?
We think it does. I have not used the 100K price target as loosely as some of the other folks in the industry, some of which are friends and I have a lot of respect for. I do think we could see 100,000. I don't know that we get there before the end of the year, but as the previous guest just mentioned, undoubtedly, continue to see volatility. And there's really one main reason for that, and that's the amount of leverage that's being offered and that can be utilized in conjunction with Bitcoin trading.
Yeah, Ben, last 10 seconds, you talked about your ETF. Do you have a timeline at all?
So actually, it's a mutual fund, and yeah, we're cautiously optimistic that we'll get approval, in the next month or so. So, and it'll be importantly risk managed. So again, it's designed to provide, managed exposure to the asset class for fiduciaries, advisors, folks that are interested in capturing the upside, but again, really concerned with mitigating the drawdowns along the way.
Thank you so much. Ben McMillan, IDX Digital Assets, Marc LoPresti, Strategic Funds. Thank you both. Great discussion there on Bitcoin.